Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. The stark Texas sun beat down on my rental car as my wife and I pulled into the long, dusty driveway of a rundown house. We were stopping for a single night on our way to visit family, trying to save money by booking a cheap Airbnb instead of a hotel. As the remote property came into view at the end of the long drive, my optimistic road trip mood started to fade. The place looked worn and isolated, not at all like the quaint country cottage pictured in the listing. My wife shot me a skeptical look as I parked the car and scanned the premises. The faded wood siding badly needed a fresh coat of paint, and the overgrown landscaping gave off a feeling of neglect. As we grabbed our overnight bags, I tried to make light of the situation, but she was clearly annoyed that I had picked such a shoddy option for our brief stay. A handwritten note greeted us on the weathered front door, directing us to use the lockbox code to access the keys. I punched in the code with some difficulty given the faded numbers and heard the stubborn lock release. A musty animal scent wafted out as I pushed open the door. Flipping on dingy overhead lights revealed dusty furniture that looked to have sat untouched for many years. The taxidermied animals adorning the walls and various mounted antlers added an ominous tone. My wife wrinkled her nose, but I gestured broadly around the main living area and said, "At least we have the place to ourselves." I wished I felt as nonchalant as I was pretending to be. Something about the stale, lifeless house gave me the creeps, but I shook it off as we inspected the bedrooms. The larger one had moldering floral wallpaper curling at the corners and reeked of mothballs. We deposited our suitcases on the sagging double bed as I proposed we go into town for dinner if we could even find one. As we headed out the front door, the warped wood floorboards groaned loudly underfoot. I made a joke about ghosts that landed with a thud in the musty silence. Throughout dinner, I kept catching my wife giving me exasperated looks whenever she thought I wasn't paying attention. I tried suggesting various activities for the next day, but she replied in noncommittal grunts, pushing the undercooked food around her plate. My attempts at optimism were met with stony silence during the drive back to the dingy little house. Hauling our overnight bags back inside, I flicked on the entryway light and saw the taxidermy coyote by the door seem to be smirking at me. That night, as I lay uncomfortably in the lumpy double bed, I had terrible dreams. I envisioned a tall, bearded man shouting as he was stabbed over and over. A blonde woman sobbed in the background before having her throat graphically slit. The vivid violence had me soaked in sweat as I jerked awake, gasping. Next to me, my wife was sound asleep, the antique floral wallpaper glowing dully in the moonlight. As I slowed my frantic breathing, the distorted images from the nightmare stayed branded in my mind. I rubbed my gritty eyes and fumbled for my phone to check the time. The screen's harsh glow showed it was only 2 a.m. As I puzzled over what caused such a viscerally disturbing dream, I glanced around the room. In the dim light, the walls seemed to creep closer. Then my breath caught in my throat. The bed was now awkwardly diagonal in the small space, the headboard pushed into the corner. I blinked slowly several times, thinking my groggy eyes were playing tricks. But the bed was definitely askew at an angle, no longer centered under the window. Heart pounding, I scrambled out from under the musty covers. The wooden floor was rough under my bare feet as I tugged at the corner post of the stubborn bed frame. My wary eyes scoured the room for any sign of intruder, but there was no clear explanation for the moved furniture. Adrenaline flooding my system, I hurried to systematically search the house. I crept from room to room, flicking on stale overhead light bulbs, finding each space untouched. Outside, the moonlit property was still and quiet. The only movement was the skeletal brush rattling in the breeze. I checked and rechecked every closet, under beds, behind furniture. Nothing seemed disturbed or out of place beyond our bedroom. Worry about our safety battled unease over unknown rooms that could still hide secrets. I stood vigil at the living room window, searching the barren Texan landscape. The lone paved road we came in on was obscured by darkness except for our car pulled up out front. A bone-white cattle skull rested by the weed-choked pasture fence, empty eye sockets staring. Exhaustion gradually softened my wired tension. I have easily dozed off, still sitting tense as a statue in the creaky armchair, By dawn's early light, I awoke with a stiff neck as my wife emerged fully rested. She raised an eyebrow at finding me asleep upright, still keeping watch essentially. As nonchalantly as possible, I suggested we grab an early breakfast before getting back on the road. She slowly waved her phone screen at me. No signal out here for 30 miles. Forcing a smile through my grogginess, I ushered her out the warped front door towards the car. I tried to rationally reassure myself as we left that country houses often shift and settle over time, but my skin still crawled thinking about what purposefully moved that bed in the night. As the rental car crunched across the long gravel drive away from the house, I checked the rearview mirror. No white-knuckled face appeared at the dingy glass, but the front door yawned open. Dark and endless like a throat waiting to swallow whole anyone foolish enough to stay there come nightfall. The Parisian rain had finally ceased when I stepped outside the cozy Airbnb apartment I had booked for my solo trip. I was eager to immerse myself in the city of light and wander the storied neighborhoods I had long dreamed of exploring. As I walked, grand houseman buildings stretched stately above the bustling streets. The tempting aromas of fresh bread, crepes, and roast chicken mingled with the cool spring air. Despite not knowing the language well, the musical sound of lively French conversations made me feel wrapped in an iconic scene of Parisian daily life. After hours spent losing myself along winding cobblestone lanes, discovering jewel box cafes, Gothic cathedrals, and postcard-perfect vistas, I made my way back as dusk fell over the shutter-framed apartment I had rented. Eager to rest my blistered feet after logging so many steps, I climbed the spiral staircase to the third-floor flat I had left that morning, tucked below an angled mansard roof. The building itself was stunning, dating back over 300 years with a faintly Baroque facade that fit right into the vibrant Marais district. Inside my temporary Parisian pied-à-terre, something felt instantly off. The cozy studio space was cloaked in shadow, only a dull gray light coming through the tall windows. I ran my hands along the wall, feeling for the familiar light switch. With some apprehension, I flicked it on, but the aged fixture remained dark. An uneasy prickle went down my neck even as I told myself the old wiring probably just needed some jiggling. I took my phone from my coat pocket and turned on the flashlight. Sweeping the narrow beam over the room, I drew in a sharp breath. The whole place was in disorder. Furniture shifted around haphazardly with cushions ripped from the vintage sofa. Fear surged through me, imagining someone hiding around each shadowy corner. Someone who could still be there in the dark. With a slightly shaking hand, I used my phone to take photos documenting the break-in, then I rushed back to check that the heavy door had automatically locked behind me on my return. It seemed securely closed, but my heart still thrashed like a caged bird. Peering through the fishy spy hole into the empty hall offered little peace of mind. No refuge or help was visible in sight along the twisting wooden staircase. Unsure if I was overreacting, but unwilling to stay there alone, I considered heading straight to the nearest busy restaurant or even the small police station I remembered passing on my earlier walk, but leaving would mean exiting back out into that murky, possibly unsafe stairway. I could call the police, but with my mediocre grasp of French, communication would be challenging. Plus, they likely dealt with petty break-ins every day in such a major tourist city and had bigger issues to handle. Trying to steady my shaky hands, I started sweeping my phone's flashlight methodically over every corner of the small studio, scanning for any signs of an intruder. Each shadow made my pulse spike until proven harmless. Along the way, I noticed with confusion that nothing appeared stolen. My luggage still sat neatly by the graceful stone fireplace. My coat hung undisturbed in the carved armoire, and my wallet and passport remained tucked inside my bag. Only the furniture was disrupted, the room left in intentional disarray. Why would someone break into this atmospheric apartment I had been so delighted to rent and flee without taking anything? None of it made sense, but I could not erase the sinister feeling that had crept under my skin. That primal instinct telling me I was not alone. That someone had been there within these walls while I was gone, and maybe lingered still, observing me from some unseen vantage point. I swept my phone light over the apartment's only bed. The lace coverlet spilled halfway to the floor, the pillows missing. As I nervously reached to smooth the linens back in place, I noticed a small envelope tucked neatly under the ornate iron bed frame. Hands trembling slightly, I gingerly pulled it out. My name was written in elongated cursive script across the front. ink so dark it looked nearly wet. Fighting the urge to drop it and flee, I reluctantly unfolded the heavy parchment paper. The same oozing script inside simply read, "We'll be watching you." Revulsion crawled down my spine at this taunting invasion of privacy from someone who had rifled through my personal belongings, violated my temporary home, and left behind these haunting words. I could almost feel hostile eyes tracking my every movement from some clever hideaway hidden cleverly in the very walls. At that moment, all desire to play intrepid tourist abandoned me. I no longer felt any charm or romance in the adorable neighborhood of winding alleys, cheerful cafes tucked below pastel apartments, and the lilting language that surrounded me. Only a cold unfamiliarity and this pervasive terror as I wondered what sinister intentions lay behind this break-in. Clutching my phone desperately, I dialed the overseas number for Airbnb support with trembling fingers. When the automated message came on in rapid French, I could not even formulate the proper phrases to describe my alarming situation. Panic rising, I started throwing all my belongings haphazardly into my luggage, paranoid eyes raking over every niche and cranny for peepholes or secret doors. Or moments before I had admired the cozy elegance of the Parisian flat, now I saw only dark corners to conceal ill intent. The oppressive room felt smaller by the second. I headed out into open daylight on busy streets filled with witnesses, away from this place that appeared quaint on the surface but crawled with malicious energy. As I dragged my bag down the narrow turns of the twisting staircase, I imagined skeletal hands reaching from the walls to snatch me backwards into the dark. Bursting out the arched door onto the vibrant street bathed in evening amber light, I finally gulped my first full breath in what seemed like hours. Never had the city of light felt so blessedly bright. I steadfastly marched several blocks, putting distance between myself and those sealed rooms that had been invaded by such malevolence. The unexpected violation filled my heart with caution towards even friendly strangers milling about the bustling sidewalks. When I reached a halo of golden light spilling from an inviting bistro, I ducked quickly inside, still feeling exposed out there in the falling night. Ensconcing myself at a small marble top table in the warm glow, I pulled out my phone again with trembling fingers. Scrolling past tempting listings to charming Parisian apartments, I booked the first modest hotel room I could find instead, paying the price for peace of mind and walls without eyes that stare unseen. The craggy Scottish cliffs and rolling emerald hills had exceeded my expectations on the long-awaited trip with my 3 childhood best friends. We fell into familiar patterns of jokes and banter as if no time had passed since high school. The rambling stone farmhouse Airbnb with dust motes dancing in beams of fading afternoon light felt like stepping into a pastoral dream. Our lively first night consisted of wine by the crackling fire and nostalgic memories at maximum volume to compensate for the perilous freedom. When we finally turned in, a fierce storm rolled over the island. I woke several times to the wind rattling the loose glass of the window panes like an angry spirit trying to get in. Each time I would float back to sleep soothed by the steady drumbeat of rain on the ancient slate roof overhead. Sometime before dawn, an especially loud clap of thunder pulled me from my slumber. The storm still bellowed outside, but another noise drifted up the stairs, the heavy front door creaking open then closed. My foggy brain tried to invent reasonable explanations. One of my friends couldn't sleep and went outside for fresh air, but even through my sleep haze, pulling open a heavy oak door against gale-force winds seemed unlikely. As I shook off the grogginess, loud knocks suddenly echoed up the stairwell. Adrenaline flooded my system even as I told myself this was some travel story cliché with a simple explanation. I crept to rouse the others, but their beds lay empty, blankets tossed lazily aside. Weird. With growing nervousness, I tiptoed down the curving stairs towards the echoed clattering against the wide front door. No one visible in the shadowy rooms, I hurried through to reach the ground floor. Reaching the entry, I hesitated before pulling open the heavy door against the tempest raging outside. Wind howled like a living creature as fine mist billowed over the threshold, but no person stood there. In fact, in the gray glow, the sheep meadows and forests beyond looked devoid of any life against the ominous clouds tinged purple by dawn. As I slowly pushed the door closed against the roaring gales, a floorboard squeaked behind me. I whirled around with my heart in my throat, but again no one appeared in the empty parlor. "Guys," I hissed through the gloom, but no reply came. Turning back around produced another shock. The previously vacant doorway now contained the silhouette of a small hunched figure, dark and featureless aside from wild hair whipping in the storm raging outside. I froze momentarily, feeling somehow more terrified by this shrunken form than if a sinister specter had appeared. At least a ghost offered some twisted form of explanation for these bizarre events. As suddenly as the figure had materialized, she, for the stature and flowing hair suggested a very old woman, turned silently away, blending back into the gloom of night. I rushed the door again only to see she had completely disappeared from view. Slamming on various lights revealed I continued to be alone in the sprawling farmhouse. But someone or something was clearly letting themselves in. My hands shook with adrenaline as I hurriedly searched all the shadowy rooms and corners. I called out again for my friends, head still spinning to comprehend their collective disappearance. The echoing house offered no answers aside from groaning eaves and the endless drumbeat of rain on ancient hand-hewn beams overhead. I checked the doors and windows for any signs of disturbance, but found only our rain-slick vehicles still parked outside, confirmation that wherever my companions were, they hadn't driven anywhere. Attempting to phone them merely revealed no cell reception in this remote coastal forest location, adding to my alone and trapped sensations. No messages or missed calls to explain why 3 people would randomly disappear without warning on a remote Scottish island. Nothing made sense but waiting helplessly until daylight, still hours away judging by the pitch black when I cracked open the front door, offered no appeal. I realized I hadn't even closed my own bedroom door in my rush down the stairs earlier. As I wearily climbed back up, likely just to collapse on my bed in exasperation, I noticed the hallway air tasted strangely stale instead of salty from ocean winds. At my room threshold, the hairs on my neck prickled before I even flipped the switch. When golden light flooded the space, it felt like electricity jolted my system. The previously empty room now contained a rolled-up figure on my bed and wrapped in a filthy tartan shawl. It was the crone from the doorway, now apparently slumbering in the 4-poster bed like some fairy tale imp making herself at home. I blinked rapidly thinking I was trapped in a bizarre dream, but the interloper remained real as stone before me. Steeling myself, I crept closer drawn by morbid curiosity. Who was she and why insert herself uninvited into our rental? Up close reeked of wood smoke, yielding no clues beyond a mud-caked hem of a dress peeking out from frayed plaid. The madness of it all dispelled any fear left in me. I ripped back the covers ready to demand answers. Nothing. Just indented pillows and a lingering barnyard odor. The shawl lay discarded in a heap, leaves and twigs tangled into its moth-eaten threads. I whirled around the room spluttering, wondering if I was losing my own mind. Had I imagined everything? But the disturbed bed linens and lingering smell evidenced something. A scream caught in my throat as the door suddenly slammed shut of its own volition, trapping me alone in the room tangled with magical forces beyond understanding. No amount of begging the universe produced any logic or my 3 missing compatriots that endless night. Only more disembodied pounding and erupting at random intervals to fray my nerves until I thought I too might disappear if left alone with the increasingly aggressive manner. By first light, I had given up on solving the mystery and focused only on packing my things and fleeing whatever haunted forces inhabited what had promised to be a whimsical country retreat. No charming converted farmhouse was worth this terror without end. I gunned our SUV down the dirt lane, leaving a plume of dust in my wake before I got swallowed again into the bottomless gloom hanging over the ancient property. No trees stirred in my wake, but my rearview mirror captured a small, faceless figure standing stoic in the driveway, shawl lifting briefly in the morning breeze like wings about to catch flight.
Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.